Hello, everyone. This is Mike Daniels with Fayr. That's Family Advocacy is Your Responsibility. Fayr is the best, most intuitive co-parenting app. And today we are doing another one of our Facebook Lives. It's Co-parenting Simplified, the Fayr Way. And I'm again joined by my two co-hosts, Gabrielle Hartley, the author of Better Apart, and Susan Guthrie. She is the founder of the Beyond Divorce podcast, which we highly recommend you check out. She has some of the top people in the whole country to help give guidance to parents all over. And we are joined also by our guest today, which is Christina McGhee. Christina is one heck of an amazing woman. She has a book called Parenting Apart. It really is interesting. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but just in diving in and looking at it a bit, I'm really interested in this topic. So Christina, welcome, and we're excited to get to know you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, Christina, what we really wanted to know about is really jump into your story. It seems like every week, we've had a 2-week hiatus, unfortunately, here, but every week my listeners really like to hear about people's personal stories, because it seems like everybody gets into this space as a result of something tumultuous that they had gone through, and they're motivated to try to make a change. And so please, why don't you let us know who you are, where you came from, what makes you tick?
Okay, well, what makes me tick? That could be a really long conversation.
At least in the divorce space.
So we'll just hit the highlights.
Yeah.
So, not like a lot of people, I did come to this where personal and professional collided for me. I am a child from a divorced family. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. And to be perfectly honest, really, divorce was not on my radar at all. It was just kind of one of those situations in our family where it happened. You put your big girl panties on and you move on. You just move forward. But then when I met the love of my life, I all of a sudden was introduced to being a bonus mom to 2 very young children. And based on my own experience, I knew what I didn't want for them.
Oh, we lost Christina, but she'll be back.
Yeah.
And until she gets back, I just want to tell everyone. So I've known Christina now for, gosh, it feels like a longer time, but it's only been a few months. And we're so lucky to have her with us today, because what she won't tell you about herself, I can tell you while she's not here. She is honestly probably the best speaker that I've ever heard give a presentation. She had a room full of divorce attorneys. Let me tell you, we are a hardcore bunch. She had a room full of divorce attorneys crying. She was talking about the impact of divorce on children, things that can go right, but also things that can go wrong. And she has such a wonderful way of being able to break down the divorce process and just really parenting from the child's perspective, which is something that again, maybe Gabrielle and Michael, even you guys, sometimes it's hard for us to remember that. We get so caught up in it from the adult side of things that we forget that the children are experiencing it in a very different way.
I mean, I remember the children's side very well. I have not been divorced as an adult, but when I wrote Better Apart and people would say, how could you write a book on divorce if you haven't been divorced? And I say, I changed houses every day. I slept in 4 beds every 10 days for 10 years. So don't tell me I don't know anything about divorce. I know a little something. I mean, the way we choose to navigate our separations really has a profound impact. I don't think I would be the lawyer or the person that I am today had it not been for my parents' divorce, for better or for worse. And I'm really hoping Christina joins us, because I have heard so many wonderful things about her. And I'm just really looking forward to listening to all of her wisdom, her insights.
I think this subject is so important, because when it comes to these kids, my daughter said something over the weekend. We were in North Carolina visiting a very close family friend, and she says, I just love this family. She said, She said, every time I come here and I'm just like observing it and just being around it, she says, it's like watching a really nice movie. And it made me feel kind of bad because I'm like, man, like I haven't given her that sort of perspective on her own life, just she just sees so much togetherness and happiness and laughter and all of these things. And I guess, in her own perspective of growing up in a divorced home herself, she sees that that's something that she's missing. And so that's so anything that Christina is able to help us to achieve that, I'm hoping to get some really good advice out of this.
Yeah.
What's interesting, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That, I can remember being a kid and having like some of my dad's girlfriends not understanding how my parents divorced really well. And sometimes their negativity would really impact all of us. Like we always did birthday parties together. And my dad for a time lived with a woman who was just like, you're divorced, your ex-wife can't come here. And so like, when I graduated from school, there were certain events that I still remember today, many, many years later that were like weird because my mom wasn't invited. And of course, like those women have come and gone and my mom's still here. So,
yeah. Well, and I see our friend Ben Heldfond is on with us. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
And talk about, there's a family that has managed to blend in a lot of ways where they don't experience that, separate family. Like once a family gets divorced, they become separate families. Oh, we've got Christina. Yay! Hi, Christina.
Okay, I moved really quick. I hope this works and holds out. I grabbed my laptop and jumped right on.
Yeah. Well, no, you're here. We've been saying nice things about you. So if your cheeks are burning, that's I was telling everyone how we met.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It feels like I've known you forever, Susan.
That's what I said. It's really been since February, which I can't even believe.
Susan has that sort of charm personality. Like I feel like I've been best friends with Susan my whole life. Hasn't it been?
Yeah, it has. Like starting at,
Well, it's COVID. I mean, this is like dog years. I mean, every month COVID, it seems like forever. So February is forever. So,
yeah.
You were cut off there, and I would want to let you continue. Just talking about. I'm sorry.
I don't know where things dropped off, but for me, I came to the topic of divorce, and I have both a professional and personal vested interest in it. Personally, I was a child from a divorced family, but divorce, I really didn't embrace kind of the impact it had on my life until much later. Really, for me, what brought all this home was becoming a bonus mom to two very young kids. So when my husband married, he had been married before and had two children. And I wanted things to be better for them. I wanted to figure out some way we could make this work because it's tough being a kid kind of caught in the middle between two different households. So I began combing the net, looking for resources, reading books, and a lot of what I found wasn't particularly helpful. I mean, there was a lot of theories, there were a lot of discussions about how things should be, but nobody offering any real practical guidance about how to get there. So I, with my social work card in my back pocket, started really digging in and trying to figure out how to do this better. And that's where my journey began. My husband was actually required to go to one of those co-parenting courses. There are a lot of jurisdictions that have courses that are mandated when you're going through the process of divorce or you're modifying orders. And he sat in one. And afterwards came home, handed me a card and said, you need to be teaching this. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Why would I be teaching a class for divorcing parents? He goes, I just think you'd be good. You ought to talk to him and check it out. And the rest, they say, is history.
Yeah, no, you are. I told everyone that we met when you were speaking at a conference, and what a spectacular speaker you are. You also shared a clip from a movie that I just want to make sure that people hear about this so they can go watch this, because I think this movie should be required viewing for all parents who are contemplating divorce or just any type of, parenting issues. This was the part where everyone started crying in the audience. But could you tell us about the movie?
Sure. I had the privilege of being part of the creative team for a documentary called Split, and it was produced and created by my dear friend and colleague, Ellen Bruno. When she separated from her children's father, she started looking for resources where kids were talking about divorce, and she came up empty-handed. So she set about on the journey of making a documentary, and it's just kids on film, no professionals, no adults, just talking about divorce. And these are not actors, they're real kids who've gone through it. And it is an incredibly profound and powerful movie for a couple of reasons. One, it really gives voice to children's experience as they go through this process, but it's also a great tool to use for starting the conversation with kids. And for lots of kids, they feel very isolated and alone, even though divorce is very common in our society. It's still something that's not really openly talked about. So for kids to be able to watch other kids talking and to watch it as a family, it's a great jumping off point, and talk about it.
Did you mention the name of it already?
But
It's Split.
there's,
Split.
like I guess you were offline. I was saying, like you, I'm an adult child of divorce, and that's how I came here. And there was really nothing written like when we were kids, right? And I can remember I was in law school. I found a book, which I'm sort of looking for. I'm not sure. I guess it's not in my office right now. And it was just like you're describing, children of divorce. And I think Kurt Vonnegut's wife might have put it together. I can't remember. Anyway, it's amazing. And I can remember, it almost gives me chills reading it, and it like made me wistful or like teary reading it, because even though I was maybe 23 when I was reading it, and the people who were being interviewed were between like 7 and 16, I could have been like, it was very reparative for me to read. And similarly, I think working for a divorce court judge and seeing how horrible the process was better than any therapy could have been, right? Because my parents divorced when I was 9, and just seeing like what happened. And I have to hand it to you, from getting married to somebody who had young children. When I met my husband, he had been married and divorced. And my first question was, do you have kids? Because I knew me at that time, I had so much baggage from having had step parents who I had a lot of opinions about, that I just felt like being a step parent has to be so hard. I mean, I think now, if that were to have happened, like, or once I had my own kids and I realized how difficult all children were, I think I could do it better. But like, when I thought I was going to have perfect children, if my kids are listening, I'm sorry, you are perfect. I'm sure they're not listening, but anyway.
No worries.
You're all perfect. But I mean, stepchildren, when you say something, you're not my mother, and I'm gonna, but you love them like what I mean. It's so complicated, it's so difficult, and I have to hand it to you, having grown up. I don't know if you grew up with step parents. I'm not sure how old did you say your parents were when they split? How old were you? I mean,
I was 14. I was 14.
Yeah.
So
So you were young enough.
yeah, definitely.
Right, you like experienced it, and it's funny, like people often would say to me, like, do you like your stepfather, right? And my stepfather, he's now 82 and he's older, and he's been such an amazing grandfather to my kids. And so like now, like he'll say like, he'll say, bye sweetie, I love you, and I'm like, oh, like it still is like, oh, that's not a relationship, but like I guess now it is, because like it takes time, and stepmothers are even harder. So God bless Susan and Christina for playing that really hard role. Neither of you would, if we rolled you again, so you were 20 years older than I was, you wouldn't want to be my stepmother, that's for sure. Because
That must have been an experience. No.
Well, step relationships are unique to each situation, and it does take a lot of work. It can be challenging, but I found it to be also very rewarding. And that's why we moved from using step language to bonus language. So
I love that. Oh my gosh. As soon as you said that.
Yeah, and myself as a bonus mom, because that's how we feel about each other, that we are in addition to, we're extra on top of, an unexpected added something to each other's lives. And I've been very fortunate and very blessed to have some really amazing kids.
And I'm going to use that. I have a so my stepsister, see, I say it and she says sister, right? Because I have a brother. When she was about 9, each of her parents married someone who had a brother and a sister. So suddenly she went from an only to being one of 5 sort of in her little world. And she hates the word step. And when we are done with this, I'm going to bring home bonus.
Bonus.
I think that's amazing.
I've adopted it. I started using it when I met Christina in
did?
February, and she
I
said
did
it. I'm like,
too.
this is so much better than being
I
the evil
think your
stepmother.
next book should be called Bonus Mom or something
Bonus
like that.
mom. It's a great term.
It's a
Bonus
great
parents.
Mm.
So I did want to ask you, well, I had this chance, and Christina's going to be on the podcast next week. So we're going to be taping that episode. So I'll probably ask this question there too. But one of the things about the movie Split, and as we're talking about children and going through divorce, if anyone's listening, there was one little boy in the movie who talked about how his parents did sit him down and told him that they were getting divorced. But then I don't remember what he said after that, but then he said, and then one day daddy left and he never came back. And I remember that I remember it very, very distinctly. That's when I started to cry in the audience. But since then I've had conversations with people, and I've heard sort of repetitively that although parents will work very hard in many cases together to have that initial conversation with their kids, they often then don't talk to them about what's happening anymore. They feel like they got over that horrible hurdle of having the divorce conversation, and then they almost just like let it unfold for the kids to experience. And I just would love to know your thoughts on how that would be properly approached, or is that the proper approach? It didn't feel like it watching the movie.
So when I talk with parents about talking to kids, yes, there is an initial what I call big talk that you have. And I tell parents, if you can sit down together and you can have this conversation and keep it tension free, then that's the best option for kids. But if you can't, you're probably better off having separate conversations. I mean, ideally, you want parents to have a conversation thoughtfully, not impulsively. So I encourage parents to sit down and talk together. What do we need to talk about? What reason are we going to give for the split? Because kids are going to want to know why. And it is important for them to have a why, but it needs to be age appropriate, and it needs to protect them from adult information. And parents tend to fall into the extremes sometimes when it comes to talking to kids about why, where they're either, oversharing or undersharing. And neither of those is really helpful for kids. So you want to kind of hit that sweet spot in the middle where you're keeping kids in the loop and you're giving them information, but you're not overwhelming them with adult details or intimate information about the marriage or things that they can't emotionally process.
And it's interesting. Like I've always been really grateful that when I remember asking my mom when at 9 why they were divorcing, and my mom said to me, we are adults, we have adult problems, and you're a kid, and we still love the two of you. They like sat us down and they were like, we love you. We're in charge. Don't try to play us against each other. And we're not telling you what happened. You don't need to worry about it. You're a kid. That was it. And like, knowing them, they probably consulted 10 specialists who said the age appropriate at age 9. But like, query, like, is it ever necessary for your kids to know who was really right or wrong? Like, I don't think so. That's my personal opinion. But like, what do you think?
Well, I don't think there is a right and wrong.
Right.
I mean, there may be one parent that initiates the process, but I feel like it takes 2 people to create a successful marriage. And when things unravel, 2 people have responsibility. Sometimes it's 80-20, sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 70-30, but everybody has some ownership over how things unfolded. And I think instead of, parents get really hung up on, my kids ought to know the truth. Well, you have to keep in mind that the truth is a slippery slope, because whose truth are you telling? and you can account
Right.
for there being at least two very different perspectives about what the truth is. And I really believe that children will come to know their own truth in their time and in their own way. They'll realize, it will become very apparent why their parents weren't compatible, that they were happier people apart than they were together. They'll see the differences. They'll know what's really great about a parent and not so great. But I do believe that kids need to hear a why, because the one question that lots of kids struggle with is that if you can stop loving each other, does it mean someday you might stop loving me?
Yeah.
Wow. I never actually thought of that.
That's probably where the insecurity comes from, because it's incredible how many of these children later on in life are medicated for insecurity, loneliness, depression, these sort of things. So this is really heartfelt stuff that you're sharing right now, and stuff that hits home for me. I have to say, when it comes to certain things, like I think the temptation is when one parent suspects that a lot of sharing is going on and it's affecting their relationship. I think that raises the desire to try to inject your truth in order to combat the other person's truth or story or whatever. Because let's face it, everybody's embellishing things to certain levels, most likely. I mean, I hear it from other co-parents who talk to me about their own situations, and you can kind of read into it that everything's muddied, and again, you have to filter out all of the emotion that's clouding things. I encourage people just to stay quiet, just say, just don't engage, don't do that to yourself. If people are going off on you, and just remove yourself from the conflict. But then that becomes contentious, because then they say, you're ignoring me. Well, I just feel like sometimes ignoring is the most effective thing you can do to communicate, believe it or not.
Well, and I think it depends, because I work with a lot of high conflict couples. And so I don't think that you have to, again, I think there's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle. So when there's lots of bad mouthing or sharing going on, your kids are coming to you with information that, and you don't feel like there's a grain of truth in there anywhere. It's our gut goes, ooh, I gotta defend myself. I gotta tell them my side of the story. The only problem is that when you fight fire with fire, kids get burned. They get caught in the middle, because when they get all of this information from you, what are they going to do with it? Right back to the other parent and say, hey, mom, dad, this is what I heard. And then they get loaded up with more facts and more information.
Right.
So I think definitely you can say things like, instead of just staying quiet, because children need an alternate perception of reality, you can say, I don't agree with what dad said. That's not the way I see it. I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been really confusing for you.
That's a good point. You got it. It's so difficult. I think about these people, like where does it break down, and what are some things parents can do? Because everybody's worried about the other person disparaging them, defaming them, discrediting them as a parent to their children. And so what can they do when that is happening? It's not just they suspect something is being said. How do you approach that with the child? Do you just attempt to approach it with the co-parent? And trying to, they're never going to correct the record if that's their view of life, of the world.
Well, I think you can make a good faith effort in trying to have a conversation with the other parent, if that's something that's not feasible, or you have a history together where the other parent is just really bitter, really conflictual, and is absolutely not going to back off from their perspective. Then I think the most important thing you can do is really validate your children's feelings and help them process it. So kids need some context, because when kids are hearing bad things about one of their parents, it's deeply disturbing, because kids literally look at themselves as half mom and half dad. So when they're hearing bad things about a parent, they have a tendency to internalize them as something bad about themselves.
I'm so happy you said that, because I don't have an MSW or PhD or anything, but this is like my whole thing. It's like, if you're half the bad person, then you're half bad. So I think that there's this whole self-esteem suffering that happens, or that can happen. I think one of the reasons, I didn't get married until I was older. And I was very comfortable being like, I was like a professional bridesmaid almost. I'm very comfortable like being a great girlfriend and being really present for other people. But like, even if it's not bad, it's like, you know, what does it really mean? And how do you like rebuild from that imperfect beginning, right? There is a song by Everclear, and if you guys haven't listened to it, and Christina, if you want a good cry, get it on. Well, because you grew up, you know, it's called Wonderful.
Mhm.
And are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
Oh, it's great. You're gonna love it. There's one line, and I've listened to it like 100 times, and every time I get teary-eyed, there's one that says, "And I don't want to meet your friends, and I don't want to start over again." No. It's like crazy, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this. And it's like I teach this class called Zealous Advocacy in the Context of Family Law, and I start the class with that. Right? No, first we talk about like what zealous advocacy is. And then I'm like, so who do you represent? Because that's the kid that nobody's talking about. It's
Well, that
amazing.
is, people don't talk about the kids. That's what I think is such a, you know, even I, as a divorce professional, as a divorce attorney, because we never see the kids, we never talk to the kids. It's almost like an anathema to think of talking to the kids, but their voices only then come to the professionals involved in the case in so many ways through the lens of the parents. And so that's why that movie Split was so, and maybe the song as well. I'm also not that familiar with it, but I feel like I know it now, Gab, after seeing you perform it.
No, you have to watch it. We're gonna watch it when we're
gonna watch it.
It's 4
But-
minutes. I have to warn you.
Yeah.
It's so good, and I might start crying. Sorry, Susan. Go ahead.
No, that's I actually lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
So, you know, that's the getting the child's voice in there. Oh, the movie, because that's why I think the movie made such a startling impact, was that none of us, I mean, it changed my world when I became a bonus mom to suddenly have 3 little people in my house and see what conflict and how, you know, what their parents having different versions of stories, all the things that we're talking about. I started to actually see it in my household and through the eyes, or in the eyes, even worse, of, at that time, 5-year-olds. And it's very impactful. It changes your perception of the world and changes certainly your perception of this process and what goes on here. But I think Christina's point was a fantastic one, that there really weren't or aren't a lot of resources. I do want to say there is a resource. This book is an amazing resource for parents or anyone needing to co-parent, but certainly for parents who are going to learn how to parent apart. I have read the book. I do recommend anyone read it, but it's full of tips. What I loved about it, it's very full of tips, and it's all written from the perspective of what's best for the children. And people have a very hard time defining that. Parents think what's best for the children is very often what's best for them.
Totally.
And, you know, it's very often not true. So I just think it's such a valuable resource.
And you know, when I worked in the courts, I just found there were so many people making decisions who had neither been divorced and had not grown up with divorce, and they had a lot of opinions about things they hadn't experienced. And I understand you can have some, you know, insight, but I think until you've been a kid and understand, or been an adult and gone through it, or have co-parented, I think it's really hard to understand how important it is for the kids to have the sense of home in both places, not dad's house and my house, but just home. Right? I had a circumstance where my dad gave his girlfriend's kid a good room, and my dad had said, well, you're only here half the time. And I was like, I'm only ever anywhere half the time.
Yeah, it's so important for kids to feel a sense of belonging. And I tell parents, regardless of how time's spent between the households, it's really important that kids feel like they have a home with mom and a home with dad, that both places are a place you belong. And to, you know, really be very sensitive to that, and how can you make that transition back and forth between those places easy and seamless for kids. And just one thing that I wanted to add about the book for anybody that may consider checking it out, I always tell parents, so it's not your typical book in the sense you don't need to read it from cover to cover to know what to do. I tell parents, go to the table of contents, look through it, find what your burning issue is. Like if you're getting ready to have that big talk, then go to that chapter and just read one chapter. And there should be enough information, tips, and strategies. It's like each chapter is like a 10-minute read for you to be able to take action in a positive way for you and your kids. And so go through it and kind of pick and choose like you would a cookbook, you know, and you're looking for the recipe to deal with this particular problem. I feel like the idea of reading a book is so overwhelming when you're in the throes of this, right? Because you've got so many different plates that you're spinning at once that I really wanted it to be very user friendly.
And it's one, I mean, I've been through it a few times, as I said, and you really do, you've hit on like every topic that I've had come up in a case in 30 years. You know, that it's a great resource. I've actually pulled it out when I'm talking to either coaching clients or clients who are experiencing issues and they have something, and I'll be like, oh, you know, and go and do exactly what you're saying, go to just that section and, you know, sort of read some things out of that for them. So I've been using it as a resource to help my clients. But one of the things I just thought of when you said that it's important for the children to feel secure and that they have a home in both places. So what would some tips be that you have for actually doing that? I know there's often one parent staying in the family home. And so that obviously usually feels very secure for the kids. But how does the parent who now has a new home, how can they help? And how can the parent who's still in the marital residence help their children feel secure?
Sure. Well, I think one of the first and most powerful ways is the language we use. So not using words like visitation, it's your time to go with your other parent. You're going to go visit them. Because I think you really need to break free of this whole visiting mentality. Kids, you know, I mean, because think about it. When you go and visit somebody or somebody comes to visit you, what do you do?
Instead of temporary.
Yeah.
Temporary, short.
They're a guest.
Yeah, it's like, do I really exist? Right.
Right. Well, and you entertain them. And then that dynamic starts up where you have one parent who's like non-stop fun, you know, Disneyland parent, and you have one parent that's laying down the law and having to deal with all the day-to-day stuff. And it also deepens resentments, you know, between parents because one feels like they're not an active part in their children's lives and the other feels like they've got to do everything. And so in order, I mean, I tell parents, what really is helpful for kids is to talk about each place like a home and to refer to your parenting time. You know, here's your time with mom, here's your time with dad. This is your home with mom, this is your home with dad. And really using what I call a two-home concept. And you have on-duty and off-duty parents. So the on-duty parent is the one that's doing the day-to-day, has the kid in, you know, with them, and is doing the primary caring, and the off-duty parent is still playing a supportive role, but is not in the mix currently. And then you shift. And so you each carry those roles at different times. I think the other thing that can be really helpful to kids is you want to include them in creating an environment that feels like home. Like, so if you have a parent that's moving out of the family home to, if you can, help kids be involved in that transition. You know, you approach it like you would other big transitions for kids. So like if your children were changing schools, you wouldn't just show up at the school and, you know, drop them off at the drop-off line and go, okay, see you in the afternoon. You drive by the school, you take a look at it, you meet the teacher, you talk about what the first day is going to be like. And you do the same thing when you're talking about making other big transitions. So showing them the place, you know, talking with them about where their space is going to be. And I realize not every divorcing couple or every divorcing parent is going to be able to provide their children with their own room. And if you can't, then allocate a special space within your home.
And it can just be like, I mean, I can remember when my parents first separated, I tell this story to clients who are like, I can't afford. I'm like, relax. Like we went from this big, beautiful house to a 4-story walk up that had all kinds of smells and gross. And then you walked in, it was like a kitchen and a pull-out couch, and my brother and my father were like on the pull-out couch, and then I was like 9, so my dad bought like this stand-up screen, and it was like a cot behind the refrigerator, and he's like, okay, you're a girl, you need privacy. And like I slept on a cot for like 2 years, and then he got a house. Like nothing happened. Like I look back on it, I can remember being in college. I was at Cornell and telling a friend of mine, and she looked at me, and in her eyes, she was she wasn't judging. She was like, wow, like it was so cool. And I was like, that was pretty cool, and it's like, and I realized like I never even like thought about it. But the truth is like, I made friends with all these like wacky people. I lived in this weird, like, I don't know, if you make it okay, then it's going to be okay. That's the thing. Like I could also remember like my dad got us this big box of crayons, and I'm sure he shouldn't have done this. And he let us draw all over the refrigerator. And then when we moved, it didn't come out. I think he had to like buy them a new refrigerator, but anyway, whatever. But like, that was our room. Like I slept in the kitchen, I colored the refrigerator. So like it felt personalized. Anyway, so now all of you know all my dirty laundry.
I already knew most of it, Gab. No.
Yeah, sorry. But not
the surface.
I didn't.
Your dirty laundry's like an iceberg. Right?
Exactly. But Christina, it's like, so listening to you, it's like we speak the same language. Like everything you're saying is like, if you got a lot of it from your experience, like I had the same take homes from my experience. And I feel so grateful to know that like you're saying it and I'm saying it, which means there must be thousands of other people I just haven't met saying it too. So like, hopefully we'll start to change the narrative, where I live and practice law and mediation in Massachusetts, we use the term parenting, and there's no plaintiff and defendant. It's just like petitioner 1, petitioner 2, and it's parenting time as follows. We never even say primary custody. We don't even say custody.
Yeah, getting away from that language, which I think is really good. It's funny. I was at one of our listeners here, Ben. I was having a conversation with him recently, and he had said something that had kind of struck a chord with me, and we were talking about all of this stuff, and he had said, in the system, when you do get involved in the system, and you have all these people making decisions because the two of you have not been able to make the decisions together. You have all these people who don't, they don't love your kids. They may care about the well-being of their kids, because it's not to say just because it's the job to care. I mean, they're still people, and I think they legitimately care about the well-being of kids, but they don't love your kids. However bad you think your ex is, they love your kids. You love your kids. And it's a matter of not leaving those decisions up to other people if you can. And I guess I'd like to get our listeners some advice from you on this. Like, I'm not talking about the initial split up. I'm talking about years down the road where people have not been successful at mitigating some of these problems, and they do escalate. And there's a lot of resentment that's harbored. And what are some steps? Like what can they do? They haven't communicated well for many years, and yet it is affecting their children. Like what's step one? I mean, what's step 1, 2, 3? If we can really just distill it down to some palatable steps, what would you say?
Well, and over the years, I've seen lots of things change, and I think when you're in the conflict, when you're having a difficult time, it's really hard to see how the future will be any different, right? But I think there's always reason for hope, and so I would say that the first piece is to take a look at what you can do as an individual. A lot of times we spend a lot of time and energy trying to control the situation or control the other person, versus taking a look at what we actually have control over. And I think also shifting our perspective to one of positive intent. So when you're going through the uncoupling process, we fall into this trap of we only look at the very worst, the things that weren't working instead of the things that did. We look at the other parent with suspicion, and we, kind of put these stories, these spins on the things that they say or they do. But if we come from a place of positive intent, which means, that person is doing the very best they can in that moment, and we don't put a story to it, and we get curious and we ask questions and we hold off on judging, that can really go a long way, is taking that first step. I think the other piece is that if you're having difficulty communicating with each other, maybe you need to engage a third party, somebody who can kind of help you get there, take the emotion out of it. That is one of the biggest traps I see parents falling into with the way they speak to each other, with the way they send emails to each other, text to each other, is that there are a lot of assumptions and judgment, and the way that we're wording things, the way that we're saying things to each other naturally puts somebody on the defensive. So if you're having trouble with that piece of it, get some support, get somebody to kind of help you gain a different perspective.
I really like that because, Fayr is all about communication, of course, and it's more than just let's just communicate. Let's communicate and document in preparation for during or post these legal proceedings. It really is trying to it's trying to curb where things begin, and I think most things begin with misunderstandings or disagreements, and then when we disagree with somebody and then we say something a little inflammatory, where we start to hurt egos and people start to, and then it just spirals out of control really fast. And so in the hope of clarifying a lot of that, for example, when somebody is told, hey, 2 months from now we have this event coming up, and it's in a text message string. Well, 2 months later, I don't remember the details of that text message string, and it's way up there. And so, and then you kind of, you've forgotten some detail about it, and then the person's harping down your throat how you forget about everything, and this, that, and the other. And so so I've kind of like designed the app to where you can put those things in, and they give you periodic the notifications of what's coming up, and they can put in the locations of the place. And so you try to get rid of some of the nonsensical things that end up escalating totally unnecessarily. And I just think communication is where it all begins. And if people can remove the emotion, the desire to frame every single thing the other person does from a place of maliciousness or place of trying to get me. And I think that's one of the big problems. Everything that comes out of that person's mouth, you're reading it from a filter of, you're a horrible person and you're just trying to hurt me.
Right. Well, and it's important to remember that any kind of communication, no matter how well worded it is always going to be filtered through the emotional state of the person.
There you go. Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of co-parenting apps. I think where you can streamline communication, and I tell my kids all the time, this is going to be a very helpful tool for you. But I also, I suggest to parents, when you're talking about how can you really quick kind of keep your perspective in check, that when you're sending any kind of communication to the other parent, you always want to send a kind email, a kind text, a kind reply, and that's kid-centered, informative, nice, like you would in a business context. And you want to be direct. So you keep it short and sweet, like you're writing a short Facebook post, like you're sending a tweet. Just focus on the details, keep it about the kids, be respectful, like you would in a business situation. And that's a really good way to kind of stay on task with what you're sending. Is this about the kids? Or is this, me getting caught up in past issues or personal assumptions?
Yeah, I think that idea of being respectful, I talk a lot about like remaining neutral, because we can't always find positive, and like when we can be respectful, it can really pave the way to more positivity, because otherwise we get like caught in this trap of negativity, which is like really easy to do. Like, you got divorced because you don't get along, and then you keep annoying each other in the same ways, and like, it can be very easy to just go down that range. So everything you're saying is like really making.
It's great. It's resonating with me tremendously. I think it's just so important for people to get control of this and early, and because it sucks to look in the rearview mirror and say, man, I'm already, whatever, a decade beyond this, and you're like, there's so many things you could have probably done better, you know, and you can't get those years back. You don't get a second chance at this, you know, and so it's just so crucial for people to learn this stuff early on and find it important, because you're raising people who are going to carry this baggage for the next, well, I mean, for the rest of their lives, and they're going to raise their own kids, and they're going to have to somehow, you know, like Ben always says, you know, pay that bill, pay that check. That you know, you leave the tab and they end up paying the bill, something to that effect. But it's really, it's so important, Christine. I'm really happy with the work that you're doing, and I'm glad that you find so much fulfillment out of it. And just hearing, I wish I could have heard that presentation you had done that Susan has mentioned twice now, and it because I got to tell you, you know, for Susan to give you that kind of pat on the back, that's really meaningful. I wish, you know, if you do have do you have like a YouTube channel? Do you have something out there that people could follow beyond the book?
I do have an online course called Co-parenting with Purpose.
There we go.
In partnership, Flourish Together. And so it's video segments and then a 90-page plus companion guide to give parents access to both, you know, the video clips as well as supportive information. So that's one way. And I also, because I'm just passionate about being in the moment with people, I have an active coaching practice. So if there's anyone out there that, you know, feels like they need some support, I work with parents all over the world by phone. And it's very action oriented, where we really look at, you know, where do you want to be and what's it going to take to get you there.
Do you work with the two? Because I mean, we need people really badly. So just if there's any professionals out there listening, you do parent coaching for just one person or for both? Like, do you help them create plans, or is it more about like how to deal with a difficult spouse, or what is it specifically that you offer?
Well, it depends on the situation. So I've had, I will say that more often than not, I'm working with one parent, because as soon as one side thinks that it's a good idea to work with a divorce coach, by default, the other side does not. So it's the exception rather than the rule. When
It is so tragic.
It is. I mean, it's sad. But I have had lots of parents. As a matter of fact, I was coaching a woman today, you know, and she and her husband want to get it right out of the gate. And so they want to be on a joint call, and we're starting from the very beginning of how do you have that first conversation? What does that look like? How do you time it? What are some things you need to say? And I just want to tell parents out there that, you know, how you start this process makes a huge difference in where you end up. You know, it really has a huge impact for kids. And when parents and kids can get access to good information and support on the front end, they get through the process much quicker, and they get through the process much better.
And also, kids remember things so much more than we do, because their, you know, their frontal lobe or their temporal sense is so different. So like, I can remember when we started to pick up my bonus sister. See, that's the first time I've said it. When we pick up my bonus sister with my bonus father, he used to honk outside the door, and she'd come out. And, you know, I don't even know today. I still like, it's almost like I'm 10 years old right now. And I'm like, why doesn't he get out and say hi? Like, because it just wasn't like in my house, it was much more friendly. So I think that like probably the way I responded is pretty like normal. Like, you just don't talk about these things. Like even my family, who's pretty functional and discussed a lot of things, and like even brought us all to a therapist, like did all the like right things. There's still like, you're just a kid. And I think grownups don't want to dump too much on kids. But I mean, I have to say, there's a little part of me right now listening that's like, I wonder why did he honk? I don't know. Anyway, you know, the point is, what you're saying again is spot on, that what we do in front of our children is going to have a lasting impact on them. And what we do in front of our stepchildren is going to have a lasting impact on them.
Absolutely. And you raise a really good point in that, you know, the whole piece about talking about it, you know, earlier when we were having the conversation about, you have that first big talk and then all of a sudden nothing else is said. You know, it's not just one big talk. It's a series. It's an ongoing conversation that runs throughout children's lives. Like that is, divorce is not something that's one and done. It's going to be a part of your children's lives for the rest of their lives. And as they grow and develop and change, different issues are going to come up. Different things may occur to them. When they start dating, or when a parent gets married, or when they get married, when they have their own children. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that divorce can impact kids' lives. And it doesn't mean that everything necessarily needs to be doom and gloom. I don't believe divorce means devastation for families.
No.
But it is a change in a family. And I think it's something that we need to talk about. And as parents, a lot of us are very scared about making it worse or overwhelming our kids, but the absence of information doesn't reduce their anxiety. It actually increases it. So we need to role model that it's okay. Do a check-in with our kids and make sure that they, understand that we're sending that subtle and strong message that this is something we can talk about. It's okay to mention your dad or your mom. It's okay to talk about what you did when you were with them. I think that that's really an important gift to give kids.
It's hard for a lot of parents.
I'm going to call my mom and thank her.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gab, you're a success story. Back
Well,
when,
I'm not. They are. Like I was just.
well, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but you're the product of a success story. Yeah.
Sorry, Susan, I trampled you.
No. I was just thinking, one of the things that's striking me about this entire conversation is we have two adults here who have very openly stated that their parents' divorces have had an impact on them up and until right now today. You're both have mentioned times that it's impacted your lives. And that goes so much to what Christina just said, is that this isn't a one and done conversation. It's not even just a series of conversations during the process of divorce. It's an ongoing conversation with your children over an extend, for their lives, because it's still their lives. It's taken a new direction.
But by the way, that doesn't mean it's a mistake, because guess what? If your kids grew up in a dysfunctional house, that's so much worse.
Yeah.
Even though, like, I do wonder, like, what would I have done had my parents not been divorced? Like my whole career is this whole thing. Anyway, and Christina, right? You might have a similar inquiry, right? Like, look where we are now.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that staying together is better, right? I mean,
No.
there's a lot of
Not
time.
at all. Not at all. Yeah.
The conflict is the problem, right?
Well,
Like,
in actuality, research shows, they took a look at kids in dysfunctional high conflict marriages, and they took a look at kids in, high conflict divorces. And what they discovered was they exhibit the same symptoms, same anxieties, the same worries, the, same problems, adjustment issues. Because really the bottom line is it's not necessarily the act of divorce. While it's a really big and difficult, challenging change for a family, what it is how mom and dad continue to relate to each other. And that can happen whether you're married or divorced.
and there's always these conversations about like so many transitions. How many meetings, Susan, have you been in where they're like, oh, that's 12 transitions. And I grew up changing houses every day. Like I said, like 4 bedrooms every 10 days. And like, to me, the issue is not the transition. The issue is the conflict. So create conflict-free transitions and you're good. It's all about a seamless flow. I get really frustrated when I hear judges say things like, do you think it's good for your children to ping pong between your 2 households? I'm like, like, is this 1973?
Well, and the other thing though, in that, oh, darn it, we lost Christina. And I wanted to ask her this, because the other thing she focused on was, and maybe you have an insight on this, Gab, was the fact that so many parents, when it comes to having conversations with each other about the children or what's best for the children, tend to focus on like changing the other parent's mind to match what they think is best, as opposed to controlling what you can control, and all you can control is yourself. Right.
Right. Well, that's a problem in the whole system, right? Like that's an issue we see in divorce and in like in the divorce process, making decisions about everything. And yeah, that's a whole learning curve. That would take probably one of Christina's biggest co-parenting packages.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's in more than one chapter in here, but I think it was impactful because, you know, it's really one of those things where you see parents trying to come to an agreement as to what's best for their children, but spending so much time instead of focused on what they think is right that they're unable to hear what the other parent thinks is right and meld them. They spend a lot of time just trying to convince the other parent why they're wrong.
It's sort of like divorce lawyers.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, you see a lot of everything, but that's actually another chapter in the book. It's really a great. It's got a great. She's got a great like little quick powerful questions card that came in the book, and I actually have myself used these as well. You know, it gives you like how to define goals and agendas, how to clarify when a parent says something. Well, what would that look like? What do you want for yourself? What do you want for your children? I mean, she really has she's really good about all these quick tips and breaking things down into bite-sized chunks when it feels so overwhelming. And that's one of the things that I thought, even when she's speaking, and I think you saw that right here, when she was speaking in front of a large group of people, Christina has a way of really breaking things down so that people can digest it and understand it. And I think that's one of her great gifts that's made her so successful at what she does.
Plus the great Deborah Harry hair.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
she's even cuter in person.
I told her, she's like, I'm from Texas. And I'm like, yeah, you have the Texas look, the blonde, blue eye, you know, kind of thing. And she's
back.
Yeah, she's back.
Are you telling stories about me?
We were.
I went back to your hair again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we covered her.
Right? Sorry. But
Oh, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. That's one of the curses from where I live, is that I am really trying hard to find some kind of reliable technology, and it's
so
tough.
far not yet, right?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. I just invested in brand new everything, and apparently we've still got some glitches to work out.
It happens, but we want to get your socials real quickly, if you don't mind sharing them, just your social handles, so that everybody can follow you in Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of that.
Yeah, so Facebook, I'm at Divorce and Children. I have a page there where I share lots of information. You can also find me online at divorceandchildren.com. I'm on Instagram, Christina _McGhee, McGhee. You can find me there at Instagram. Pop on over. I am on Twitter as at Christina McGhee, but I'm not as active there. Twitter is a little bit overwhelming to me at the moment, so I'm trying to work through that. But yes, love to be connected. So if you've got a question, please come on over to Facebook and let's get a conversation started.
Yeah.
Well,
and you're going to be on Divorce and Beyond in just a couple of weeks. So everybody watch the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
And she doesn't know it yet, but she's going to have a blog on the Better at Part blog as well. We'll talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
My people, your people.
Yeah.
Totally.
Christina, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate people like you to come on and really share your knowledge, and I think we're moving the needle. All of us are moving the needle in a very positive direction, and it's high time, because this has been going on for far too long. And but yeah, we thank you, and you're always welcome back at any time. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks everyone for who tuned in, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, take care.
All right, bye.
You know.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you finally.
Yeah.